Wired into technology transformation, this is the Digital Bulletin podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Digital Bulletin podcast. A new year and a new format to freshen things up for you, listener. Each month from here on in, 3 industry insiders will be taking the floor and debating important issues and topics from the world of technology. For this edition, the panel discusses the continued growth of cloud-native development. Erica Langhi, Andrew Davidson, and Detelina Vassileva, you'll hear more about them in a minute, will reflect on the effects of COVID-19 on this trend, why it isn't necessarily straightforward to move to this development model, and they share their thoughts on the culture and skills needed to become truly cloud-native. The discussion is chaired expertly by Digital Bulletin Content Director James Henderson.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Digital Bulletin podcast with your host James Henderson, the editor of Digital Bulletin, and we're looking forward to our first podcast of 2022 where we have 3 experts who I'm really looking forward to speaking with today. I'm going to let the guests introduce themselves. Maybe Andrew, if you could introduce yourself first, that would be great.
Sure, thanks. Good to be here, James. I'm Andrew Davidson, VP Cloud Products here at MongoDB. And I've really been front and center on our global database service, MongoDB Atlas, which has over 100,000 signups every month today. And it's really the leading independent database service in the world. And really excited to kind of talk about some of the trends we're seeing in the market and hear Erica and Lena's perspectives as well and how they contrast.
No, absolutely. I am too. And Alina, if you could do the same and introduce yourself and tell us a bit of your background and the company you're at, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So my name is Detelina Vassileva, or Lina for short. I'm the head of the cloud operations department at HeleCloud. HeleCloud is a premier consulting partner for AWS, and since recently a managed services partner as well. My greatest achievement from last year. We as a company help customers use AWS in the best possible way. So anything from creating the infrastructure, optimizing it, plus cloud native software development and taking care of it and continuously optimizing it further on.
Fantastic. And last but very much not least, Erica, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Erica Langhi. I'm a solution architect at Red Hat. Red Hat, like a leading open source vendor, we help customers using open source to transform their ways of working. And I have a background in development and also embracing cloud native technologies. So very happy to be here and to chat with Andrew and Lina.
Fantastic. Now, the topic that we're going to be speaking with today on the podcast is about cloud native development heading into the new year. And while we'd all like to, I guess, look forward and think about a world post-pandemic, it's sort of impossible to talk about this topic, without discussing that. So that's where we'll start. I don't know who wants to take this on first. Maybe Erica, as I introduced you last, only fair to bring you in first. Maybe let's start about how the pandemic has really accelerated cloud native development. To what extent is that the case, and are we still seeing that really rapid trend now, or is that maybe tapering off a bit? How do you see that?
Yeah, so certainly the pandemic has created kind of a shift in how we're living and working. And we have seen a surge in remote workers and developers, and definitely a need to have applications and data remote and distributed. So the pandemic has created a shift in also cloud native approach, because let's traditionally say cloud native has been adopted as a way to bring applications to the market in the fastest possible way. But with the pandemic, there's been a shift because organizations have adopted cloud native to say provide business continuity, to manage a remote workforce as well, and to create that business agility that is really related also to the cloud native principles. So in a sense, I think that the pandemic has added also more value to a cloud native approach in terms of like addressing change and uncertainty. So in a way, I believe that it's here to stay, because in any situation where organizations are willing to address that agility, but also to address the uncertainty and the change, cloud native is the approach to follow.
Absolutely, and maybe then, Lena, maybe bring us your point of view on that question as well, please.
Initially, when the pandemic started, we saw a decrease in projects because at the very beginning in 2020, people weren't sure what was happening, and they were sort of postponing any big projects about migrations or transformations on top of the cloud. And at the same time, we saw an increase in managed services. And then gradually it was, again, everyone onto the cloud, because that's going to solve all of our problems. But the challenge that we're seeing is that everyone hopes to be able to land on the cloud with as little initial investment as possible. And in the end, you either go all in or you don't take the full benefit of being on the cloud. Because if you don't transform your application stack, it ends up being more expensive, less secure, more risky. And in the end, people are like, this is so much more complicated than it used to be on the data center. Why did we do this again?
No, that's an excellent point you make. It's certainly not painless, and I think more and more companies, as they're going through these cloud journeys, will find that. Andrew, what's your viewpoint on how it's accelerated cloud native development, would you say?
I mean, to Lena's point, I think it's interesting that even really before the pandemic hit, there had already been kind of this awakening that the lift and shift model of adopting cloud was not the model. I think 5 years ago, that was maybe still the model. Lena, maybe you're seeing, folks who are still kind of on their back foot in terms of cloud adoption, and maybe I've seen more the bleeding edge. I'm not sure, but I felt like there was a shift over the last 5 years away from lift and shift, and people wanting to adopt, really the right abstractions to enable smaller teams to move with self-service agility, and that there was generally that awakening in the industry. And I felt like you could feel that, for example, in kind of the sentiment shift at reInvent over the years. But the pandemic absolutely just hit that like a lightning bolt. All of a sudden, it was just absolutely vital that someone working from a cafe or working from their home or working from a park even could collaborate in a virtual sense with other developers. And that idea of the two pizza team became sort of the model everyone wanted. And they wanted that team to be able to be fully controlling its own destiny and delivering business value quickly. And so it all sort of shifted on, do you have technical abstractions that give your developers the ability to do that safely? And that we were kind of very lucky, I think, from a time perspective, that when we had built Atlas, the whole philosophy was self-service with no way to disable good security defaults. And so it kind of enabled these teams to move quickly without ever shooting themselves in the foot, always requiring encryption everywhere, et cetera, over the wire, all the stuff that in the self-managed traditional software sense, people would cut the corner on. And so that having that kind of pivot point, we heard it from many of our customers that when they had that massive shift, having their database infrastructure, which is the highest gravity, the center of the security concern, having that be the piece that didn't need to transform and change, and allowing them to around that transform how they collaborated, and moving away from the sort of VPN oriented, we're inside the secure wall model, to a more Google style beyond corp trustless security model, and having the database already be ready for that posture. It just really was interesting to watch.
Absolutely right. And Andrew, I'm just going to stay with you just for a second. We obviously we're 2 years into this now, and we've seen billions, if not trillions, invested into these sort of cloud journeys and transformations. What then do we expect to see in 2022? Is that massive boom, that acceleration, is that likely to tail off? What do you expect to see in terms of trends this year?
I mean, I think honestly, it's just going to continue. It's going to continue focusing on giving developers the ability to move fast and think at the level of abstraction that allows them to express business value directly without having to really muck around at the infrastructure level as much. I think we have seen the rise of tools like Terraform that allow you to declaratively manage your infrastructure, and kind of have often viewed that as more of a DevOps phenomenon. But really, if you think about it, that's critical to empower those developers to no longer need to be thinking at the level of systems and to really move up. So I think you'll just continue to see the rush and the rise of serverless. We've certainly made major investments in creating a serverless form factor for our database service, getting away from having to even really think about pre-provisioning and planning and sizing. Now, realistically, a lot of that remains kind of for net new microservices kind of at the cutting edge, but you're just going to see that continue to accelerate. So that, I use the analogy that 10 years from now, I would expect that just as you turn on the air conditioner or your light bulb, you don't think about how many, kilowatt hours are being consumed. That's the way it's going to go for all of the layers of the development stack over time.
Fantastic. Now, Lena, I'd like to throw the same question to you. How do you feel? What level of growth do you expect to see in 2022, and then actually beyond that as well?
I hope that in 2022 we divorce from all of the old operational models and really embrace the whole philosophy of DevOps. Like, for example, if you one of the problems with cloud adoption is that, and we've touched upon this earlier with Erica and Andrew both, that you have to change your way of thinking. It's not just about the technology, it's not just about the serverless, but you take people who have worked in one way and now they have to work in a completely different way and think in a different way. And for example, if you followed something like the ITIL model, which is the exact opposite to DevOps, the library of this is the change management process. This is these are your levels of engineers, and you escalate from level 1 to level 2 to level 3. People are doing swarming now, apparently, and they're like, there's no escalation. Everyone gets into a swarm and they work together. So what I hope to see in 2022 is more focus on the way we think about technology and the way we use technology, so that we can really implement it in a way that works.
And Erica, your thoughts on this year and beyond, if you would. What sort of levels of growth do you think we're going to see, and are there any other trends that maybe the listeners should be looking out for?
Yeah, I totally agree with Lena and Andrew about the fact that cloud native is here to stay, and also like a cultural change is actually here to happen. Something I think it probably is going to happen in 2022 is also expanding to new territories like edge computing. So we'll see those technologies also, in the closer to the edge, say, and in that respect, I think we will see a need for standardization of both hardware and software, and many organizations are already doing that. So definitely, it's the cloud native approach and adoption is going to increase. And also, I read recently some figures about the fact that technologies like Kubernetes, just for 1 year to the next, have increased in terms of adoption of numbers like 67%, which is really a massive adoption. So it's interesting what Lena was saying, because we really hope that all these new workloads they're going to happen actually with a cloud first principle, and I think this is actually here to stay. Absolutely.
Find us as Digital Bulletin on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and at Digi_Bulletin on Twitter.
Lena, I wanted to come back to you on the next question. We've already, we've established, we've seen, we know it's the case that these changes are happening at breakneck speed, almost in real time, the amount of investment that's going into these changes. With the pace of that change, what would you say are the main challenges that teams are facing when they're moving to this new development model?
I guess the very first problem that we're seeing, and it could be with the type of customer, because larger enterprises, they have more budget upfront to invest in transformation, and smaller companies are finding it difficult to understand what the value of this transformation actually is. So they are coming with some application. It may be a monolith. It may not understand DNS yet, which obviously would be a problem for the cloud. It may be a case case of convincing them why immutable is better than mutable infrastructure. So I think a problem I'm seeing very often, a challenge for many organizations is making the business case and finding the budget for the transformation that they sort of see is necessary, but it's very difficult to prove it upstairs. And then this is not something you do just once, because whenever as you start doing things like infrastructure as code and managing everything in an automated fashion and using everything cloud native, the cloud is changing all the time. So the latest and greatest that you deployed last year is not the latest and greatest 6 months later. And you have to constantly plan for this updates, incremental updates and transformations that you need to do and make the business case for it.
Is there then maybe without outside technology experts, this sort of misconception that this is something that you can almost do once and not have to worry about, a general sort of upkeep and reinvestment and reskilling? Is that something that we're seeing, and is that a big issue?
I think it's difficult for people to understand, like, it's like doing a home renovation. We're used to, like, we're painting the walls, we're redoing the bathroom, and we don't worry about the bathroom for 10 years, and we don't worry about paint for 2 years if you have toddlers, tops. And then people sort of expect to have that kind of predictability with renovations of their applications or infrastructure as well. And it's very difficult to have that, because what we're noticing is that no standard can survive for more than 6 months. You have to refactor code, you have to re-architect to improve host security, reliability, performance, and all of those things.
That's a really good point there. And Erica, I just want to jump to you. As a sort of senior solutions architect, someone who's right in the middle of that, what challenges are your guys facing, would you say? What are some of the things that you're hearing time and time again?
Yes, so I think one of the main challenge is the fact that organizations, they think about, they still linked to the traditional way of building applications. So I'm totally agree with Lena that cloud native adoption is like a journey rather than a destination. So you really need to rethink the traditional way that you had to build applications. So for instance, when we think about cloud native, we think about like maybe microservices. So one of the challenges is like thinking about the granularity of those microservices. Typically, you associate one microservice to a functionality, but then you quickly end up with a high number of services that then you need to monitor and manage. So there are capabilities that you need to put into the picture that you haven't maybe thought about with your traditional way of building applications. Another challenge that we are seeing is also maybe a lock-in factor. So if you really want to take advantage of the cloud native principles and the ability to use also a hybrid model, you need to follow those standards and understand how they're also evolving over time, as Lena was saying. So trying really to keep up to date with all the changes and try to adapt your applications. So, I mean, those are just a couple of examples of the challenges that you have in cloud native development. But I still believe that once you understand those challenges and you embrace and solve those challenges, you have a lot of benefits from the approach. So it's still worth trying to address those challenges from the start.
I can see you nodding your head there, Andrew. Is that something maybe take it from there? Give us your thoughts on that.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Erica and Lena both. I mean, we all know that these teams are going to have to continue to build these microservice use cases out to achieve the needs of the business. And when they do so, they're going to sort of be confronted with a set of challenges. They could essentially force themselves to rush something out and effectively take on kind of technical or organizational debt in the process of doing so. And so the question is, are there ways of adopting this new posture that alleviate some of that risk, some of that concern? And we actually have a pretty strong point of view on this. I mean, we've sort of seen this play out in particular at the state level, at the data level, where a lot of folks were using these legacy relational databases, and they just felt like they had scalability or continuous uptime or rich query requirements that just required them to break free of those traditional systems of record. And so we saw this, 10 years ago play out with the adoption of new sort of niche services, key value store for scalability, a time series store over here, a graph store over there, et cetera. And we kind of looked at this space and thought, the document model, it feels uniquely like a superset of these models. What if we could actually make the argument and invest in 10 years later, make this so robust for a wide variety of those use cases that a single data store could actually service most of those workloads with a single interface? And so what we've sort of seen is, instead of needing to basically bolt on a whole new database engine for every microservice that specializes for a particular use case, instead, why not be able to have the same, abstraction, the same developer experience, the same management experience, the same visibility for a DevOps team, the same way of thinking about it, and have us do the kind of work of moving that data around for you, rather than you needing to invest in all this brittle ETL to move everything between, a database and a search engine, for example. The most sort of obvious example. Every database needs a companion search engine. Why should those be two different systems? So, with MongoDB Atlas, we embed Lucene powered search right there into the query mainline. And so the reason I think that's relevant to this discussion is, what this is about is the rise of basically best in breed offerings that offer that abstraction, that can be assembled together to reduce the amount of moving parts, to reduce the amount of vendors in the mix, and frankly, to reduce the lock-in to the cloud provider model, which would basically be to say, use these 15 different boxes or 200 AWS services. Instead of needing all of those services, why not take a couple of really good services, like OpenShift for Kubernetes and MongoDB Atlas for the data tier, and really have the most important capabilities that you need for a modern enterprise. And I think it's much easier to imagine managing that. It's much easier to standardize and train on something like that. So that gets me really excited.
I want to come on to skills here, and all three of you are in positions where you will see that it's well known, within the technology space, that this fight for the best skilled people and the best talent out there it's fierce, and in some areas people are able to sort of write their own checks and good for them. But is there an issue here that for organizations to take on this approach really quickly and effectively, are the skills there? I'll stay with you for the minute, Andrew. Are they there? And if not, what can be done to make sure that those skills can be brought in as quickly and efficiently as possible?
I think it's a great question. The beautiful thing is that these skills are totally learnable, right? I mean, I've seen this because, at a data tier, you sort of, you talk to an interesting group of folks, and we've seen the shift where traditionally in the older model, we might have been plugged into maybe database administrators, let's say. 7 years ago, maybe that was the main constituent, an operator of database or database administrator. What I've seen is that persona over the last 7 years has actually shifted and become cloud architects, or many of them have. I mean, the ones who kind of realize, it's important not to be laggards. We can really be involved in truly transformational amount of value for our enterprises. A lot of them have retooled. They're spending time with the cloud providers. They're spending time with, consulting firms like Lena's, and really becoming those experts and paving the way for those app devs to adopt in a new posture. And the companies where they don't have operators who are thinking in that modern way, truth of the matter is those app devs are doing it on their own anyway. So you're sort of seeing this trend in both areas. The app devs, this whole phenomenon is the only way they're going to live and breathe. This is all natural to them. So the operators kind of are companions to that, who can easily keep up, and there's so many resources now to get that education.
And question to you, Lena, as well. I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this topic.
Oh, it's very difficult with the skills.
That's why I asked. That's what that insight.
When we were doing the MSP audit with AWS in November, they said one of our strongest points was that we're doing academies for cloud skills. They said there's a huge shortage of cloud skills on the market, and if everyone is just headhunting, then we're exacerbating the problem. We're not solving it. But the issue we're seeing is that, for example, we have customers who really like the idea of transitioning to containers, for example, and they use an application vendor to do all their software development, and then this application vendor is like, well, sorry, we don't have the skills for that, and the project is then put on hold for 6 months until they find someone. And our whole model is based on growing like an ecosystem of cloud knowledge, where we cover both the infrastructure and the software on top of that, so that we can have all the skills on the menu to be able to assist customers with this transformation.
Fantastic. And Erica, maybe I could get your perspective on this as well. You guys at Red Hat, are there the skills that you need, do you think? Are there the skills in the wider industry as well? How do you see this? How do you see this debate?
Yeah, I agree with Andrew saying that in technology, in a sense, you become like a lifelong learner, because skills you always need to keep up with, like new technologies and new skills. So there's definitely a lack of cloud native skills on the market, but also techies are interested in like learning new things. Something I would add also, in addition to the technical skills, is also maybe the DevOps skills that are needed to embrace a cloud native approach. So in parallel to those more technical skills, I would say that an organization should look also at DevOps skill as a way to transform the way of working and try to implement that collaboration that was mentioned already on this chat. So that's also something to keep in mind to adopt actually the approach.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I'll stay with you for the minute, Eric, but just want to come on to this next question. And I've heard it said from many people I've spoken to that it is now essential for businesses to move to cloud native application development. I guess the first question is that something you broadly agree with?
I would certainly agree that with a cloud native approach, businesses are more in a position to be agile, to build applications that are better at responding at change and uncertainty, and also be more competitive on the market. So it's definitely something to keep in mind for organizations. But as always in technology, there isn't one size fits it all. So in a sense, as cloud native is also quite complex as an approach, if you in your organization have, for instance, an application, a legacy application that doesn't fit actually with the level of agility that is implemented with the cloud native approach, probably doesn't make sense to transform it, because you will spend a lot of time trying to transform the monolith into a microservices architecture, and then you will not gain the benefits. So it's definitely crucial, cloud native, but as always, like, you need to identify if you are with the right use case for adoption.
And do you think that maybe that might be one of the mistakes people are making, actually, or companies are making, is that they're trying to move whole scale their infrastructure into cloud native? And do you think that's something that might be happening?
It could be, I mean, but because there is the buzzword cloud native, so everyone wants to jump on the on this new buzzword. But I mean, there are definitely benefits, and I'm here to encourage the adoption, but just be critical also on the use case.
Lena, is what do you sit on this? Is it essential? I've heard that word used so many times. Absolutely essential. I mean, is it the case that the organizations that don't do this are going to be left behind and ultimately fall by the wayside, or is that hyperbole, would you say?
I think essential is a very dangerous word here, because what's going to happen if you call cloud native essential is that everyone's going to try it and implement it the best way they can, and all of these terms, agile and DevOps and cloud native, if you ask 6 people in a room what they mean, you receive 7 different definitions. So first we need to really understand what this is about, and then figure out how it can fit our operating model, because I'm going to go back to ITIL as a framework. When that came out, everyone was like, this is what everyone needs to do, this is the way forward, and everyone who implemented it 100% was like, this totally doesn't work. because with every framework that you implement, you have to adapt it to your organizational culture, to your way of work, to your actual technical needs. And it's the same with cloud native. There are some things that are going to move you forward, and there are some things that are just going to be extras. So I wouldn't call it essential. I think that for most companies, it's going to be looking at a list of things that they can improve and selecting what works for what time of their development.
Yeah, I mean that sounds sensible. Andrew, where do you sit? Is it as Lena or Erica said? There's no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet, if you like.
I mean, I definitely agree. I agree.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet, but I do think basically, if you take a step back, what we're seeing is the overall economy is shifting so that every company is increasingly a software company. So there are you can find nooks and crannies in the economy where companies are not being challenged as much to need to become software companies. So in those companies, they can get away with sort of not adopting some of this cultural shift as aggressively, perhaps. But for the most part, we're seeing a very clear trend where legacy enterprises are being disrupted by new entrants who adopt software as the key differentiator, and enterprises that are able to leverage software to truly stay ahead of the curve are really being rewarded and are clearly able to compete. So ultimately, everyone's in a war for talent, and folks are going to go to the companies that allow them to feel like they can be productive. I think of software developers as sort of the artisans of our time. They want to go add value, not be stuck mucking around. And so if they can go and add clear business value, that's going to be extremely important for them. And that's important for the C-levels of those companies, because retaining and hiring technical talent is the most important thing at the C-level of so many of these companies. So whether that means, it's definitely not one size fits all. And I completely agree that the term cloud native is loaded. I might even frankly make a slightly more incendiary comment and say it's almost Orwellian to me that cloud native has sort of somehow been claimed by the Kubernetes community. That never made much sense to me. To me, it needs to be a bigger tent and refer to I think what we're talking about today, which is all of the new trends and technologies and techniques that make sense. When we're talking about cloud native that way, then it's a big set of different muscles to be built. And absolutely, companies that need to operate as software companies need to adopt these tools. And everyone else, more power to them if they don't need to adopt software. It's surprising though.
No, well said. I've taken a lot of your time this afternoon from all you guys. You're joining us from all over the world, so we really do appreciate that. But before I let you go, I wondered, and Erica, I'll start with you. If you had any sort of closing thoughts on this topic, maybe I know we've spoken about thoughts of the year, but just any general final thoughts you have on the debate that we've been having today.
Yeah, I think maybe one final thought would be to, again, think about the way you want to transform your organization and see if you can leverage cloud native to implement that transformation for all the use cases that are suitable. So definitely be open to learn new skills and be open to the new technologies that are going to appear on the market. But the focus should really be, the way you want to transform your organization to be more competitive.
Fantastic. And Andrew, I'll come to you next. Is there any sort of final thought? Don't want for people of a certain age to go all sort of Jerry Springer or anything like that. But are there any sort of final thoughts for you today?
Look, I mean, I think it's important to be able to empower builders. That's really what this is about. Empowering builders in a way that is sustainable, scalable, secure, that you can feel confident is actually better and safer than the old way. So you're moving faster and more safe. That's what this trend is about, and adopting best-in-breed technologies like a multi-cloud database service in MongoDB Atlas and so many other solutions that exist out there that are so symbiotic, I think is highly complementary to that vision.
And Lena, the last word goes to you.
Yeah, well, my advice would be make sure you understand the terms and make sense of anything that people were talking with agile DevOps and cloud native and all of that before you make any changes. Understand what would work well for your company culture and start from the culture understanding what you can adopt and readily, what you need to adapt before you adopt it, and then make sure you have people who can work with your engineers to create the business cases so that you can incrementally transform everything, but start small, experiment, and then do everything properly.
That's it, folks. Can I say a big thank you to our panellists, Erica Langhi, Andrew Davidson, and Detelina Vassileva. I'm sure you'll agree that they brought some really interesting perspectives there. Thanks as well to James for steering the conversation. You can read a lot more about the tech trends which are set to dominate this year in the latest issue of the Digital Bulletin magazine, which is available over on digitalbulletin.com. We're grateful for you tuning in, listener, and we hope you will join us again next time. Until then, goodbye.
That was the Digital Bulletin podcast. Listen and subscribe to a range of podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Plug in for news, features and case studies on the very latest in enterprise technology and digital transformation.